We're just gonna wet the whistle. Well, hello, my beautiful reader friends, and welcome back, or welcome for the first time if you are new here. My name is Lori Beth, and today's video we are going to talk about all of the books that I read in the month of July, which was a pretty decent month for me considering I felt myself starting to slump a little bit towards the end of the month, kind of like midway through towards the end of the month, and I don't know, I was having a hard time wanting to pick up books and finish them. But regardless of that happening, it was a really good month for me book-wise and kind of an interesting month for me book-wise. Some of the books were a little bit different than what I would typically go for, but I think that kind of helped keep me going when that slump was kind of coming on. I like to say July was the month that I really truly entered my weird girl fiction era, and I don't know if I'm leaving that era anytime soon. I'm kind of here for it. It's a vibe. It's very demure, very mindful, if you will. But without further ado, we do have quite a few books to go over, so we're gonna go ahead and jump right in. So first up in the month of July, I read Perfume and Pain by Anna Dorn. First of all, can we talk about this gorgeous book? Like, if this cover didn't make you want to buy this book alone, I don't know what else would, besides the synopsis of the story itself. So we follow a main character named Astrid, who is an author herself, and she's had some decent success and has been kind of prompted to write another book from her publisher. She has been kind of slumping in the writing world herself and has found herself back in this like writing group that she became a part of or kind of helped establish before she became a published author. And this writing group is just full of like eclectic people that are pretty brutally honest about each other's works. And while she's in this group, she meets another young woman, an aspiring writer, and they kind of start this relationship with each other. Astrid has actually been known to have these very volatile relationships in the past. So she's usually in toxic relationships, not just because of the people she dates, but also because of her own behaviors. And she's very, very self-sabotaging. So much so where she, even in her writing career, has done like press tours and stuff and constantly puts her foot in her mouth and gets herself in trouble. She says some pretty questionable things when she's sitting in rooms full of people, so much so that her publicist is like, you literally are not allowed to do interviews unless I'm involved. That's the kind of like trouble she gets herself involved in all the time. Basically, Astrid is just going through this very transformative time in her life where she's learning a little bit more about herself when she's in a different place in her life, trying to move through these things that she always kind of like wash, rinses, repeats, which are toxic relationships, and kind of getting past that and trying to find a healthier version of both herself and then also relationships in her life. She is also very consumed with perfumes and scents. She's kind of obsessed with finding her own signature scent, but she is always late night and drunkenly ordering perfume samples online that she can try to use in different situations. I don't know, it was very interesting. It was very raw and edgy, the writing style. I really like the idea of this woman who is not only struggling with her personal like romantic life, but her professional life as well. And I liked that she was very controversial. Like, she struggled with so many things, with drugs, with alcohol, with talking to people appropriately. She drops a couple of words in the book that you would not necessarily expect coming from a woman, let alone a gay woman. And I liked that she was very, again, like this controversial person for being like kind of a woke gay woman in this time or in this day and age. It was very, very interesting. I really liked it. And I thought the writing style, again, was super edgy, and it really made me kind of drawn to Anna Dorn as an author, and I could see myself definitely picking up more of her books. I think I rated this one 3.5 stars. So thought I was totally prepared. Usually I am much better prepared. My recording schedule feels very weird this week and kind of like squeezing it in between things, so that is just an excuse as to why I feel so disorganized and disheveled today. I'm not typically like that. I'm a very type A organized person. But next on my list was The Ashes and the Star-Cursed King by Carissa Broadbent, which is the second book in the Crowns of Nyaxia series. And let me tell you what, I love this series dearly. I put off reading this a little bit because I know that the third book is coming out soon. I think it might be coming out this fall. I will correct myself on that if I'm wrong, but I've been trying really hard to continue with series this year and not spend so much time in between books like I typically do, so much so where I'm like forgetting details and then it's hard to continue on with the series just because I don't want them to end. So I was really excited to get to book 2 and doubly excited because I know that book 3 is also coming out within a reasonable amount of time. But this is the second book in the series and we continue our story with Aurea and Rain after ending the first book on kind of a transformative point in time for Aurea specifically. She kind of ends book 1 feeling very, very betrayed, and her whole world is kind of turned upside down by who she thought she could trust and who she thought she knew and what she knew about them and vice versa. So I thought that the first book was really good because I liked the whole tournament situation, especially her being this human amongst vampires, but she never really comes across as a weak character. You find that out in book 1, and then in book 2, she's already kind of at this place where she is like guard up. She's going to protect herself. That's what she's always been trained to do. When you grow up in a world full of vampires and you're a human, you are already like a couple steps behind. But Aurea never really comes off that way. And I thought that the second book was really good at picking up right where it left off and kind of working through and getting to the point. And because there was this big breach of trust between these two main characters at the end of book 1, they kind of come together at the beginning of this story to form an alliance and try to get through everything that is happening within this kingdom, like all the political turmoil that's going on now because everything has been flipped upside down, and use each other to get to a greater point in the story. And of course, as we move through the story, they start to heal and build their relationship and kind of learn to trust each other again and lean on each other. And I am telling you what, there is something in Carissa Broadbent's writing that is like crack. Like, you start reading her books and you can't put them down. It is everything that I look for in a romantasy series. The political intrigue, the enemies to lovers to enemies, to fixing these broken relationships, the rawness, the grittiness, the betrayal. I love stories like this. And again, her writing style is so easy to read and fall into. I will say that Carissa Broadbent is probably one of my newest discovered for myself fantasy authors. I rated this one 4 stars and I'm so excited for the third book to come out. I can't wait. This is a really, really good series. And next up, this was a book that I just stumbled across at one of my local bookstores in Ann Arbor. And I was drawn to it by the cover first and foremost. And then when I started reading the synopsis of the back, it sounded very intriguing because it is one of two things. It is a retelling, but a contemporary retelling. And if you've been here for a minute, you know that I have personally struggled with retellings in the past. Cue Circe, I just can't always get into retellings, but a contemporary setting is a whole different ballgame. And the book that I have talked about for a whole minute now without telling you the title is Fruit of the Dead by Rachel Lyon. Let's have a moment for the cover. Stunning, right? I mean, look at that. How could you not see this in a bookstore and be prompted to pick it up? But this is a retelling specifically of Persephone and Demeter, which is a mother-daughter relationship. Again, something that I didn't know that I was missing. I have found myself more drawn to like family drama stories over the last year or so. I don't know what that says about me. I think that means that I'm fully an adult woman and I'm looking back on things like relationships with family members and also relationships between mothers and daughters, which is what the story is about. And again, this is set in a contemporary world, so we're talking nowadays. So it opens up by introducing us to one of our main characters, Corey. She is a camp counselor who is in the final day of this sleepaway camp, a summer camp somewhere, deep in the woods. And she is introduced to one of the young kids that she has had in her summer camp, to his father. This young kid doesn't really click well with a lot of people. He's very shy, and his father notices that he has kind of built a relationship with this camp counselor. And this father invites Corey to come and stay and watch his kids for him for the rest of the summer because he is like a multimillionaire. He works for Big Pharma and he is always working, always busy. He basically lives on this private island that he owns, and he needs someone to basically be a live-in nanny for his kids for the rest of the summer. So right out of the gate, the book kind of just like picks up and starts the story, which I really appreciated. She's kind of whisked away to this island. She says yes right away. And then of course, when she gets there, she's wondering if that was the right call. And as she's there, things just kind of start to unravel and things are very creepy. This guy who seemed like a good guy is maybe a little bit more of a predator, a creep. He introduces her to this pain medication that he is a part of producing as part of this big pharma company. And she starts to develop a habit with this pain medication, which is supposed to be like non-habit forming, but clearly that's just ain't how it works. She is whisked away so quickly that her mother doesn't really know where she's at, what she's doing. Her mother is kind of a helicopter parent, but also struggles with letting her daughter, who is now technically 18, go and live her life after high school and experience things and experience life. But of course, this whole situation is kind of weird, a little creepy. She doesn't know exactly where her daughter is. Things on the island are kind of weird. Like there's staff that works there. There's like no internet connection unless you get the Wi-Fi from someone. It's all very unsettling and also just super intriguing. So we follow this young woman and this mother through their journey of this summer of trying to like get back to each other, but also learning things about themselves and about their relationship along the way. I thought it was really, really intriguing. I couldn't put the book down. I finished it, I think, in like 2 days' time. And I don't know. I just loved it so much. I thought it was a really good find. I love those days where I go into the bookstore. I don't really have an idea in mind of what I'm looking for. And I just like let myself go. And sometimes judging books by covers has really worked out in the past for me. This is what I did with this one. Loved the cover, ended up loving the story. So it was a win-win. I did rate this one 3.75 stars. Not a perfect book, but I really, really did enjoy it. And I kind of hope that she has more in the works. I really liked the writing style of this one. We're just gonna wet the whistle a little bit. All right, moving on. Next, I read Penance by Eliza Clark, and holy moly, this quickly became probably not only my biggest surprise for the month of July, but my favorite in the month of July. I couldn't put this book down. Could not put this book down. It was the first Eliza Clark I have ever read, and I will be reading everything that she writes without question going forward. So this is a really interesting story about a group of young girls that live in a small Yorkshire town along the coastline, and kind of the relationships and the toxic things that happen amongst groups of young girls specifically throughout our formative years, like in our middle school and high school years. So in the story, we start off by following an investigative journalist who has had some decent success in his career with some of the stuff that he has written, and has published some pretty popular books in the true crime realm. And then he kind of, quote unquote, gets canceled online and has some issues with his career. He is prompted by his publisher to try to go at it one more time, to do one more case and get his name back in good graces, if you will. So he stumbles upon this case that happens in this small town, and it follows a group of schoolgirls and a tragedy that happens amongst them. It was written in this very interesting style, something I've never quite read before. So we follow the investigator. We follow each and every one of the girls that is in the case. You're slowly introduced to them over the course of the book. which I thought was really kind of unique and interesting. So it's not like bouncing back and forth between them the whole time. It's like you get girl A, and then some stuff happens with the investigator, and then girl B. And so you're moved through the story with their POVs the entire time. And there was also some parts of the book that included podcast narrative, which was really interesting. So like a transcript from a podcast, because that was a big part of the story as well. So the book kind of touched on a lot of different topics, not only, again, the things that happen with young girls, young women, during this time of their lives, but also our obsession with true crime and kind of making it a lucrative business. It was all just very, very interesting. I loved the writing style. Again, I thought this whole like podcast thing was really interesting. I just thought it was really cool, and the POVs as they came in through the story made it very gripping, and I knew I was going to be able to get to each girl like throughout the book. It made you kind of want to pick it up and keep reading it. And Eliza Clark is you can tell by the way she writes, she is clever. She is like witty, smart, sharp, clever, all of those words you can think to describe like just a very smart person, and that comes out in her writing. And like, again, I will definitely be picking up everything that she has written and will continue to write. She's quickly becoming like a new favorite author of mine. I did rate this one 4.5 stars. Highly recommend it, especially if you have an inclination towards true crime in general. And even if you don't, I think you could still really enjoy this. Like my husband's not super big into true crime, but I know that he would really, really like this book. So Penance, Eliza Clark, highly recommend. All right, so next, and I'm not going to spend too much time on this one because this was actually my lowest rated book for the month of July, and I was really bummed about it. It was Mrs. Dalloway by Virginia Woolf. This is the really beautiful edition that I picked up from my local bookstore, which is kind of the, I don't know what you call it. I just call it like a flip book, and I don't think that's right. But on the other side, when you flip the book over, is a different story. So it is... what is it? The Hours by Michael Cunningham, which is apparently like a more present day retelling or inspired by story by Mrs. Dalloway. Anyways, I'm kind of going off course here. I don't know if it's Virginia Woolf's writing. I don't know if it's the time, like the era that this book was written in. I just did not connect with it. I found it really hard to follow, very stream of consciousness, in my opinion, where it would kind of just go from like one person's POV to the next, and you would kind of not really like realize that was happening as it was going on, and then that made it really like it would be Mrs. Dalloway, and then suddenly it would be a different character, and I would like not realize it until like a paragraph in, and I was like, oh, I'm kind of confused, but also that makes sense because this is a different person. Anyways, it just wasn't really my type of book. I had this feeling as I was reading it that I just wasn't smart enough to understand what was going on. And I've said this a few times now, I don't honestly believe that's a thing. Are we not smart enough to read something? No, I don't think that's a thing, but I know why we feel that way sometimes. And I think it's when we're just not like making a connection. Things just aren't clicking. That's what this book was for me. And again, I'm kind of bummed. I always wanted to read Virginia Woolf. Maybe it was just this story. I'm not gonna like write her off completely. I know she's got a lot of other things that I could kind of dip my toe into. So I'm gonna do that. But for this one, I just didn't really like it. I didn't love it. 2.5 stars. That was it. And next up, I read The Sirens by Amelia Hart. This was an ARC that I received from NetGalley. So thank you to NetGalley and the publishers for the advanced copy of this book. And I really liked this. It was really, really beautiful and so atmospheric. If you know anything about Amelia Hart, like if you've read her previous stories, Wayward more specifically, you kind of know the writing style that she writes in. It's very whimsical, kind of romantic, and again, very atmospheric. And this book was pretty much just like that. So we follow, similarly to Wayward, we follow a family. In this case, it's 2 sisters, and they are separated by like 20 years. They are like really far apart, and they've always had this kind of funny relationship where the older sister has been kind of standoffish, or she kind of like drops off the face of a map at times. And then the younger sister has always felt almost like an only child because there was such a big age gap between them, and they've just lived very different lives. The youngest sister is now in college, and she is experiencing these very weird things, kind of like nightmares, dreams, where she's having outbursts or reactions to things that she can't really understand or wrap her mind around. And she doesn't know how to go to her parents and tell them this. She thinks, who can I talk to about this stuff? My older sister. She's always kind of had like really weird things happen in her life as well. Both of these sisters also happen to have this issue, and I can't remember the name of it. I'll look it up. It says it in the book. It's like an actual medical condition. But of course the story kind of takes us somewhere with it. Like we find out why they have this medical condition. So with this condition that they have, they cannot get wet. Like they physically can't get in water, can't have water touch them. They can't get stuck in the rain. They start to break out on their skin into like these really itchy, scaly, like segments. They've seen their toes and their hands do weird things. This has basically been explained as this medical condition for their entire lives. They have ways that they can basically counteract this. Special like medicated wipes and stuff. That's how they shower. It all seems like very weird and kind of like a very, very unique medical condition. But as I said, of course, as the story goes on, we start to realize why they are the way that they are. The story itself is set in Australia, and the older sister has gone off on the coast somewhere and bought this like decrepit house that's like falling apart basically right on a cliffside, right on the ocean. And the younger sister, because she's dealing with all of these things now in her life, in her young adult life, doesn't know what to do. She runs away and goes to her sister's house where she's never been to before. She hasn't seen her sister in months. Again, they have like this relationship that kind of goes up and down and back and forth where they talk and they don't talk, but they've always had this connection, and it's because of this condition that they share, and also now some of these experiences that the younger sister is having. She knows that her older sister has dealt with stuff like that too. It was a very cool story. It's written in multiple POVs, so older sister, younger sister. They're at different timelines at the POVs, so we get the older sister's view as she's kind of growing up, and then the younger sister living in the now. And as the story goes on, their timelines kind of cross paths, and then we end up like where we currently are at in time, and everything is explained. I'm not going to say too much because I don't want to give away everything that goes on between them and why they have such a deep connection. I will just say it was very beautiful and very female forward, which is basically what she did with Wayward as well. If you read that one, it was another book about women and the history of women in this family and all of the trials and tribulations that they've been through and what made them the way that they are. I really like that about her writing, that she kind of just brings to the forefront what it's like to be a young woman and finding strength in certain things because you are a woman, and the relationship factor as well. I think is really kind of interesting to read about. Again, I don't know why I'm like drawn to these family things recently, but I found it really, really beautiful, and the setting of this book was absolutely gorgeous. I loved this seaside house where like you're getting like all the senses from being there, the sounds, the smells, the mold, the must, but it's like also kind of comforting at the same time. I don't know. I love atmospheric stories like that. And I think Amelia Hart is just a very good writer. So I highly recommend this one. I'm going to put the release date somewhere here. I highly recommend this one. Definitely grab this one when it comes out. I did rate this one 4 stars, so loved, loved, loved. And next up on my list, I read Butcher and Blackbird by Brynne Weaver. I'm looking at my Goodreads because I don't have the physical copy of this. I actually was lent a copy from my friend. I have since returned it. And then I also incorporated the audio of this because I heard that to fully experience this book, listening to the audio was going to be the most fun way to do so. And it did not disappoint. I will say, even if you aren't interested in physically reading this book, if you just want something entertaining to listen to, the audio was so well done. I don't listen to a ton of audiobooks. I just started dabbling this year, but this was done as a duet, so it was basically like just listening to a movie playing in your ears. It was very well done. The banter of them going back and forth really kind of picked up on all of the kind of funny aspects of the dialogue. So I really, really appreciated that. The book itself was fine. Like, I liked the story. I liked that they are these kind of like Dexter-like people. They're serial killers who kill serial killers. They are kind of like the good bad guys that get rid of like the bad guys. And they are both famous in their own sense. Like in this whole world of serial killers, they both know each other by their nicknames and they kind of run into each other while trying to take care of this bad serial killer. And then starts this relationship that they have. It's kind of like over the course of a couple of years, and they meet up once a year to kind of do this competition with each other and take care of another serial killer. Like whoever kills him first wins that part of the competition. So it was really goofy, kind of silly in that sense. I did appreciate that there was a lot of trigger warnings at the beginning of the book. So it's graphic, like it goes into some graphic stuff when it comes to the actual killing and torturing people. But again, it is really funny as well, like the dynamic between these two. And then it does get pretty darn spicy as well. So trigger warnings on all of those things. With that being said, I had a good time listening to it and then reading what I did physically. It was just kind of a silly, goofy, good time. Didn't think it was like super like mind-blowing. I don't know if I'm going to continue on with the series. I've heard that the second book is even better though, so I guess I'm kind of intrigued by that. I don't know. We'll see. Anyways, either way, I had a really good time. 3.5 stars. Nothing out of this world, but if you're looking for something good to listen to, I would definitely recommend the audio of this one. And last but not least that I read in the month of July was Kairos by Jenny Erpenbeck. Another stunning cover. And this book for me, how do I say it? It was a roller coaster. I'm just going to say that. It was a roller coaster. So in the story, we follow a young woman named Katerina who stumbles into this relationship with an older married gentleman named Hans, and kind of what happens over their entire course of knowing each other and their relationship with each other. It starts in the late 1980s. Both of them live in East Berlin. And if you know anything about this time in history, it kind of follows the demise of the Berlin Wall and then finally the ending of the separation of East and West Berlin. And they are kind of in this time frame as this is all going on. It revolves around that. So there's some political intrigue as far as what is happening at this time in Germany, and then also just the relationship between the two of them. Katerina is just a beautiful, smart young woman who is entering the adult world, kind of trying to figure out what she wants to do with her life. And she starts to become so involved with Hans that he almost, I want to say he takes advantage of her. He kind of overshadows her, makes her feel less than she is, and kind of just controls her in the sense of he likes having this affair on the side, but he also has his own family on the other side. So he gets to have his cake and eat it too kind of situation. It's your typical affair where this older man is telling this young woman that he's going to leave his wife, he's going to do all these things, and they are going to be in love and together forever. And of course, that's not exactly how it works out. But it is very intriguing to watch a young woman kind of go through these things and then start to learn from them. It's hard to read. It's a little painful at times. Again, Hans becomes a little bit, I almost want to say like emotionally abusive towards Katerina. And you can kind of see him dim the light in her a little bit, which is really just hard to read. As a woman in her mid-30s who has been through my own things with relationships and some toxic relationships in the past, being at this beautiful, loving, healthy place where I am in my life now, looking back on these things is really hard to read, but also kind of relatable. And I like seeing it written out on paper and very physically reading, watching this character go through these things and come out the other side, knowing things that she didn't know before. So again, the book was kind of a roller coaster. I felt like it got kind of dry and hard to read, more towards like the 80% mark. It felt dense at some times. Like I almost just kind of wanted to get to the end to see what was officially going to happen between the two of them, even though you kind of know, like you kind of think you know what's going to happen between the two of them. It's like I was ready for the resolve to happen, and I just wanted Katerina to be able to like be happy and breathe. Like I just wanted that so much for her. It was very beautifully written, but again, kind of dense, kind of dry at some points. So if you like kind of like a Kafka, like heavy writing style, you would absolutely love this book. And again, I really appreciated the time frame that it was set in. You almost kind of forget that it's not even further in the past, that it's like in the 80s when all of this is happening, but that intrigue from the time frame, from the political unrest that was happening in Germany at the time with the Berlin Wall, kind of just added another layer to the story, and I really, really appreciated that. So this one was pretty good. I did only rate it 3.5 stars, which is not bad, but I did feel like it was like a little bit too long. But other than that, I thought it was a very beautifully written story. Well, there you have it, my friends. Those are all of the books that I read in the month of July, which was 8 books in total. Lowest being 2.5 stars, which is actually pretty low for me. Highest being, 4.5 stars. So quite a range. Also a range in genre in there. Like I said at the beginning of the video, it was kind of like I had a lot going on. I feel like I was all over the place, but again, I was kind of slumping a little bit in the sense where I like didn't know what I wanted to read, hence me kind of going into the bookstore and just eyes on, looking for something and grabbing what sounded good at the time. Anyways, 8 books in total, pretty darn good, decent month for me. This was a great month for me to experience some new authors as well, which I really, really love doing, and finding some new favorites, which is always a plus. With that being said, I would love to know what you read in the month of July, anything good that you think I should add to a future TBR. Drop that in a comment below. Or have you read any of the books that we talked about in today's video? Let me know what you thought about them. I love starting conversations about books. Let's talk about books. With that being said, if you liked this video, go ahead and hit that thumbs up button because it always helps a girl out. And if you want to make sure you don't miss any of my other upcoming videos, go ahead and hit that subscribe button too. As always, it has been an absolute blast, and I can't wait to see you guys in the next one.